All right, everybody, we are live. Welcome to the Gunner Technology Livestream, a now 20-minute tech talk, weekly tech talk for non-techies and techies alike. I'm Derry Merkins. With me again is Cody Swan, CEO of Gunner Technology. Cody, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm playing a bit injured here. I'm on backup computer and backup health as I'm
I
fighting a
somehow
little bit
I
of the
somehow
flu or
digitally
something.
got you sick. I somehow digitally got you sick
Yeah,
last week, so I apologize for that. I don't know how that works, but
yeah, it's amazing.
uh,
These viruses, these computer viruses are real things.
um, so this is actually part one of a new 10-part series that we're doing. It's going to be on sort of the technology industry as a whole. So each week is going to be a different topic covering a whole broad range of stuff from the technology industry. And actually, as part of our new series, we actually have a sponsor this week. So our sponsor, as you can see on my hat and on Cody's hat, is Country Shore, and Country Shore is a lifestyle brand. You can visit them at countryshoreoutfitters.com. They got all sorts of cool gear, so make sure to check them out and give them a look.
And
Um,
while you're introing the topic, I'm gonna go grab my power cord because my power just went from 100% to 30%. So I think I'm gonna lose it here if I don't go grab that power cord real quick. So will you
our
intro
topic
the
should have been
series?
batteries. Our topic should be batteries at some point. So yeah, the first topic this week is actually one of the more hot button issues right now in the technology industry. It's something you've probably been hearing a lot about on the news. It might be something you don't entirely understand. So hopefully, after this episode, we can sort of give you a better idea of what net neutrality is. You've probably heard a whole bunch on the news that the FCC just passed, or actually repealed, a bunch of regulation related to net neutrality. So we'll try and explain what effect, if any, that's going to have on you. What sort of the two sides of the argument are. And I guess as Cody gets his power on, I can sort of segue into the question for this week. And the question for this week is, make sure I've got it right. Okay, what is net neutrality and why should I care?
I got here just in the nick of time, didn't I?
You did.
Excellent, excellent. So net neutrality is basically the technical definition of it is basically net neutrality is treating every website or every basically tube on the internet equally. So net neutrality prevents ISPs such as Comcast or Time Warner or AT&T from treating any destination and the road to get to that destination differently. So they have to give johndoe.com the same treatment that they give to, say, ESPN.com. So that's what net neutrality is. The reason that someone might care is without net neutrality, these ISPs can treat these sites differently. And so what that means in theory is that Comcast, AT&T, Time Warner, and these guys can basically slow down connections to certain sites and certain types of sites. So if you really like going to johndoe.com, it may be slower to get to johndoe.com because the ISP has determined that johndoe.com is not as important to our customers as say ESPN.com or NewYorkTimes.com or whatever. That's kind of it in a very excuse me, high level view. There's a lot more analogies that make it a little bit more clear, but that's kind of directly answers your question right there.
And I was going to say, I think as far as analogies go, and it's not even analogies, it's really precedent. I think the Obama administration's rules that came into effect, I believe it was end of 2014, beginning of 2015, treated internet traffic as in the same way that we treat all telecommunications traffic. So I think the analogy or the precedent is basically phone lines. So if you're talking about phone companies, they can't block you from calling someone, for example, or they can't trace what you're saying on a phone call. You basically have to have the freedom to be able to use the phone lines however you want to use them. And I think the interesting thing too that comes in with net neutrality is the fact that the internet was phone line based for a long time. So there was already sort of an idea that internet traffic was or functioned as a telecommunication utility, right?
Right, and that's exactly right. The net neutrality treated the internet as a utility. sort of just like the water that goes to your house or exactly the phone lines, and it was maintained as such. Opponents of net neutrality say, what's the big deal? Until net neutrality didn't even exist until 2014, 2015, when the Obama administration enacted it. However, by default, it was treated like that. Exactly what you said is because the internet was born on phone lines, which was a utility. So it's kind of a false argument to say, well, net neutrality didn't exist until 2014, 2015.
So it was sort of the de facto rule that sort of just became codified in law at that point.
Right.
And so what were the reasons for the repeal of net neutrality? What was the purpose of getting rid of it?
Well, basically, the argument is that the ISPs can serve their customers better and cheaper if they don't have to treat every site the same. If they can kind of they can bundle packages. They can sort of like when you buy cable, you can buy like HBO and Showtime and save some money because they've chosen to bundle that together. So ISPs can do the same thing with, say, like Netflix and Hulu. So if you buy that package, you're saving more on like the video streaming package, and the people who don't want video streaming save more because they're not getting access to the site, so they can save money by not paying for something they're not even using.
And I guess the danger there might be that then there could be some price gouging issues, or there could be an issue of certain companies having or ISPs forcing companies to pay a certain amount to be able to use the video streaming bandwidth of their service, and that sort of maybe being cost prohibitive to new players in that arena.
Right. It all comes down to how much you trust the ISPs. And the weird thing is there's basically no trust for the ISPs. No, you talk to anyone, and the most hated company in the world is Comcast, and they're the world's largest ISP. So they say stuff like, we're not going to block sites, we're not going to throttle sites. Well, no one believes them. And now there's no regulation holding them back. The interesting thing, though, is this is, for me, all these issues come down to not whether it's whether it should or shouldn't. It matters is, where does the ownership lie? And really, the ownership lies with the ISP. The ISPs own these pipes that we're using to access the websites. So literally, I mean, in my view, if they own it, they should be able to do whatever they want. The problem with that is they're a quasi-monopoly. So it comes down to how much you trust them to actually serve their customers' needs. And like I said, no one really trusts Comcast.
And I think there actually is a history of ISPs blocking sites or limiting traffic. I know P2P traffic was limited by, I think it was AT&T. Might have been Comcast.
There's a litany of events throughout history where ISPs have blocked certain things that they didn't like. P2P traffic, file sharing traffic, FaceTime. When FaceTime first came out, AT&T blocked it, so you had to access it over Wi-Fi. There's a long history of it. So definitely when they say we're not going to do it, it's like, well, you already have done it.
But there has to be some sort of negative on the other side as far as net neutrality potentially being injurious to either innovation or new players or something along the lines. I mean, net neutrality can't just be 100% beneficial, right?
No, it can't. I mean, it does sort of, any type of regulation has the potential to stifle innovation. And, if you listen to these ISPs, it can be expensive for them to service every site the same. And the US lags behind a lot of other countries in bandwidth speed. And this could be a reason, is because the ISPs don't want to innovate their pipes, for lack of a better term, because they have to treat everything the same. So it's expensive for them to actually innovate. So no, net neutrality isn't 100% good. It's not 100% bad. It just is something that could have ramifications for the consumer, who basically just wants to use the internet and have access to everything kind of in the same cut and dry manner.
And what's your opinion on the idea that internet access is now a right in the same way that access to clean water is a right?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I think that it's a privilege, sort of like driving your car, having a driver's license, more so than a right. Although I don't know how that's exactly codified now, but the idea that internet access is a right is kind of silly. It's not one of the basic needs of a citizen. It's a nice thing to have. It's definitely not a requirement to survive.
I've also seen the idea that internet access at certain speeds is a right. Like even slow internet access doesn't necessarily qualify as good enough for the right to internet access. And I think the idea behind that uh, is you'd have a better functioning democracy if more people had access to more information.
Yeah, so that's an interesting idea that we talk about all the time, and the idea that the internet is used to make a democracy better is almost laughable. You can look at certain regimes throughout the world that aren't democracies and how they use the internet to let us know what is going on, the crimes that are being committed against the citizenry, and sure that is a helpful thing for them to get that information out. However, established democracies like the United States, like the countries in Europe, they're not using the internet as a tool to better democracy. They're using a tool. They're using the internet as an echo chamber to strengthen their own beliefs. They're not using the internet for discourse, for civil discourse, or anything like that. So the idea that the internet is going to make the United States a better democratic country is ludicrous.
So let's take a bit of a different track here. As far as the FCC overruling the Obama era regulations, uh, where do you see this going in the future as far as ISPs go, as far as the net neutrality debate goes? I think New York and Washington have already filed suit in court to get the net neutrality regulations reinstated. But what do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's interesting because like a lot of things that are going on right now, the states are kind of fighting back. And I didn't read the entire ruling, but I think they did something that limited the state's ability to implement net neutrality at the state level. So that would be interesting as well, because I think that a lot of states will try to say, sort of like the repeal of the Clean Air Act earlier this year, and how states are saying, well, we're still going to enact our own Clean Air Act. I don't think they're going to have the ability to do that with net neutrality. However, I think that and the funny thing is as this has come and gone, there is all this controversy and a discussion leading up to it, and then shortly after the ruling was made, there's a lot of backlash, and now it's already sort of died down. I think it'll stay quiet until it doesn't need to be, until something happens to make it not quiet. When the ISPs actually roll out a bundled package where they have not just different speeds as they do right now, but kind of different access, I think that's when you're going to see a lot of pushback, and people are actually going to realize what net neutrality means to them, kind of thing.
Is there a potential secondary solution to this issue? It seems like the fact that there's this limited resource of fiber optic cables that are delivering all of the internet at this point is sort of the mitigating factor, and the ISP's monopolistic control over those. Is there any sort of technology out there that's thinking about competing with that? Maybe satellite technology or some other alternative?
Well, you know what I actually think this does? I think this opens the door for Google Fiber, because the fact of the matter is, bandwidth is not that expensive. The ISP, it's not a limited resource. The ISPs want you to believe it is, and that it's so much strain on them to crank down 10 more megabytes. It's not. It's not really limited. They have plenty of excess. They are controlling the supply of it.
So that's a man-made shortage of supply, basically. That's not
Correct.
necessarily they have plenty of fiber.
It's not like crude oil where we're running out of supply here at all. And Google Fiber is slowly making their way across the country, and they're not going to restrict access whatsoever. They want all sorts of access. They want the more access, the better for them, because they're going to benefit by the more people who use the internet and the longer they use it. So I think you'll see sort of like these ISPs. Again, it's Comcast, who also owns NBC. They're making mistakes in the digital industry outside of the control of bandwidth. With digital rights access and stuff like that, companies like Google aren't going to make that same mistake. So I think this opens the door for companies like Google, companies like Amazon, companies like Facebook, who benefit the more time you spend on the internet, for them to kind of lay their own fiber optic network and have it completely open and almost outside of all government control.
And I think actually Google and Facebook are doing, I think it's called Google Zero, or it might be Facebook Zero, where they're basically paying people back for bandwidth usage in third world countries. So they're basically encouraging people to use their services for free, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we talk about kind of this brave new world where we're going to have, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and, those big companies kind of ruling the world. And I think that's where we're going, because the more the old guard tries to constrict access and kind of apply old methodologies to new technology, the more the new guard is going to step in, and they're going to look like the champions. They're going to look like, oh, okay, well, Comcast doesn't want you to have access to this. Well, here we go. You can have as much access as you want. And they're going to look like heroes, but they're not entirely altruistic either.
So there's just potentially massive unintended consequences here for the ISPs.
Exactly. And they're taking one of the few things that they kind of have as an advantage over these up and coming companies, or I mean, they're not up and coming, but
this new player in the game called Google.
Yeah. You may have heard of them. It's Google. But as Google and Amazon move out of just being online technology companies into kind of service providers, the Comcast and AT&T are playing right into their hands, kind of thing.
Interesting. So I mean, it seems like a tricky situation, because as far as the Brave New World analogy goes, it seems like there's just massive companies or massive government oversight, and you sort of have to pick your poison.
Yeah, well, it's not like the railroads, which we talked about, where government regulation almost killed the railroads, and it was kind of the entrepreneurial spirit that got the railroads across the country. Starting your own fiber network is so cost prohibitive that there's no one, there's no Vanderbilt out there who's just going to kind of lay a fiber network across the country and kind of undercut Google and Facebook and Comcast.
Not even Elon Musk. It feels like he can do anything.
Yeah, true. Maybe he'll lay a good network on Mars, and so by the time we get there, it'll be wired first before civilization actually takes off.
Just blazing fast internet on Mars.
I just think we kind of have to understand the consequences of whomever it is who lays the foundation for the internet that we're going to use. We just have to be cognizant of that. We have to kind of be watchful for the signs that things are starting to go south. Like as consumers, we permitted this bundling of cable, which has now led us to these crazy prices. And now, by the way, you're starting to see this unbundling, which is the internet is providing. But as consumers, we allowed it to occur because we thought, oh, well, this is cool. We can allow, we're getting a perceived benefit. But it was kind of like a slow, like a frog sitting in a boiling pot. We didn't realize it until it was too late. So you just kind of have to be aware of that, aware of the consequences, and then push back when you see those consequences starting to boil over.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on. Everyone should just be perceptive and cognizant, and sort of keep an eye on things and make sure nothing gets too far out of whack. So I guess that'll do it for this episode. We'll be back next week with a new topic about the technology industry in general. Make sure to check out our sponsor, CountryShore, at countryshoreoutfitters.com. You can view the blog about this episode at gunnertech.wordpress.com. check out the podcast on iTunes, and we'll actually be launching our ebook about our JavaScript series. It should be coming up within the next couple of weeks, so keep an eye out for that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere else you can buy ebooks. Check us out next Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern. I'm in London, so my time zones are all mixed up, but 1 o'clock Eastern time. Cody, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be better and off my janky old technology by then.
Fingers crossed. All right, thanks guys. We'll see you then.